We all reach points in our life where we realize that something needs to change. Maybe you've achieved all of the goals you set for yourself and you're wondering what's next. Or maybe you're feeling a disconnect between your daily life and the life that you want to be living. Or you might just want more of a challenge to see what's possible for your life. This is where reinvention comes in. It's not about dramatically overhauling your life or becoming a completely different person. It's all about consciously reassessing your life so that you can make sure that you're living in alignment with your values and your vision for the life that you actually want. Today, we're going to be exploring what reinvention really means and why it's valuable at any stage of life. I'm also going to be breaking it down into a simple process that you can start to follow today. So whether you're thinking about making a career change or starting a business or just building the skills and habits that you need to show up in your life the way that you want to every single day, the principles of reinvention can guide you and help you get there. To help you get started on your reinvention journey, I've created a free Redesign Your Life planner. It will walk you through the steps that we're talking about in today's video so that you can apply what you're learning in your actual life. And if you'd love to have guidance, support, and community to help you through the reinvention process, then you should join me for my live workshop, Your Next Chapter. Having a clear process to follow, plus simple tools that you can use to implement what you're learning, will help you make progress so much faster. Both the planner and the workshop complement everything we're going to be talking about today. You can find links to both down in the description box. So first, let's start by defining what we mean when we're talking about reinventing yourself. A simple way to think about reinvention is a process of deliberately changing your life. That means identifying areas of your life that you want to change and grow in, and then taking deliberate actions to make those changes in your life. So when we're thinking about reinventing our lives, we could be focused on just very specific areas in our lives, or we could be looking at reinventing our entire life, whether it's who we are, our identity and how we show up, how we act in the world, or various areas of our lives. So the type of work we do, our relationships, all aspects of who we are, all aspects of our lives are ripe and available for reinvention. So let's talk a bit about some of the core components of what a reinvention is. So first of all, it's intentional. It means we are doing it deliberately. We are on purpose deciding what areas of our life we want to change, how we want to change them, and why we want to change them. In contrast to kind of going through life, going through the motions, being reactive, letting things happen to us, when we reinvent, we're taking deliberate actions in our lives. And those changes are actually meaningful changes. We're not talking about surface level changes like cutting our hair shorter or wearing yellow being our favorite color versus blue being our favorite color. We're really talking about fundamental shifts in how we're showing up in our lives, what our lives look like, the type of behavior we have, and how we see ourselves. So all of those things, any and all of them can evolve over time if we want them to. Reinvention also involves honest self-reflection. So that means paying attention to who we are, where we are right now, and being honest with ourselves about who we're being, who we want to be, where we're falling short, and also what we want out of our lives, which helps us then connect with our values. So reinvention is also values driven. It's driven by our personal values, at least ideally. Yes, it's entirely possible to reinvent yourself to align more with societal expectations, but in the long run, that's not going to lead to personal fulfillment. So for our purposes, when I'm talking about reinvention, I'm talking about it from a personal fulfillment perspective. Reinvention is also action-oriented. We're not just sitting back and thinking about who we would like to be in the future. We take deliberate actions in order to become that person, because it's only through our actions that our desires, who we want to be, actually then show up in our lives as something concrete and meaningful, where we can see a difference between who we were before, what we were doing before, and what we're doing now that we're reinventing ourselves. And lastly, reinvention is something that's sustainable, meaning that it is something that when we reinvent ourselves, we sustain this for as long as that definition of who we want to be still serves us. And this sustainability piece is especially important because creating lasting change in our lives can be so difficult, so elusive. So when we're thinking about reinvention, we want to make sure that we're not just looking at short-term changes, right? How to reinvent yourself in 90 days, those kinds of things. It's very easy to do things short-term. It's another thing to sustain that change in your life past those 30 days, past those 90 days, so that you can actually become that person. It is just who you are now. It is just how you live now. So those are all important factors or principles of reinvention, if you will. But why is it that reinvention even matters? Why do we want to do this? And at the end of the day, we all want to live happy and fulfilling and meaningful lives. We want to be self-actualized, meaning that we feel like we have control over our lives. We're happy with the lives that we're living. We're proud of the people that we're becoming and how we show up in our lives. And reinvention is how we make sure that we're able to achieve those things for ourselves. Also, the reality is that the world is constantly changing around us, and we are constantly changing as well. So the things that we wanted 10, 15, 20 years ago might be very different, or even a year ago or a month ago might be very different from the things that we want now. And so in order to honor the fact that our preferences and desires change, we want to make sure that we are engaging in that process of reinvention so that we can not just keep living the life that we've always been living, but to make sure that we're living the most fulfilling life that we can live. Reinvention also makes sure that we're not just being stagnant in our lives and being bored in our lives, but that we're able to be excited about the lives that we're living because they are actually meaningful lives that we have agency in, that we are actively working on. Now, let's talk about what reinvention is not. It is not about becoming an entirely different person. That's not necessarily required. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, the version that you truly desire to be. And that doesn't mean that you're constantly in this mental space of, well, you have to always be improving. That is not true. Becoming the best version of yourself doesn't mean that you're always seeking to improve. It just means that you're always evaluating to make sure you're on track. It's kind of like driving a car. When we're driving a car and we're heading to a specific destination, we don't just let the car loose, or we don't just hold the steering wheel in one spot. We make micro adjustments to make sure that we're still heading in the right direction because, the road is curving underneath us. Well, reinvention works the same way. It's all about making sure that we're staying on the course that works for us, not necessarily that we have to constantly set new destinations or get entirely new cars. To beat that metaphor to death. Reinvention also is not a linear process, meaning that you don't just decide, hey, I want to be someone who spends more quality time with my family, and then suddenly you're that person. It's actually a process of changing the behaviors and the thoughts that you have in your life and your relationship with others. That's something that's going to take time. So be very careful about the temptation to just completely overhaul any area of your life very quickly and overnight, because the behaviors that got us to where we are right now, they are pretty well ingrained in us, and it's a process to build new pathways on top of them. Reinvention is also not something that just happens on its own. We have to deliberately decide that we want to change in order to be sure that we're going to move in our best and most desirable direction. It's really easy to just go with the flow of life and let life happen to you. And will we change that way? Yes, but not necessarily in the ways that we truly want to. That's not necessarily the path to get to our best life. We're going to want to take more deliberate action, and we're not necessarily born with the skills and the knowledge that we need to actually make sure that we're doing these things in our lives. Like it seems like it should just come naturally to us, this wayfinding, this path, finding this becoming the best version of ourselves. But in reality, that's not the case, which is why we have things like the Redesign Your Life Planner, the Your Next Chapter workshop to really help us get the education and tools and support and guidance we need to learn these skills that we can then use to work on our lives. And lastly, reinvention is something that is available to you for your entire life, meaning that it's not just something for young people. It's not just something that you do before you have kids or after your kids are gone or when this particular stage of your life, when your kids are no longer young and when you have more time. It's actually something that you can consciously do every day of your life. It's just a way of living. Now, of course, what we're going to be diving into is a very specific reinvention process that you're going to want to sit down and do. But the action piece, right? Because we talked about how reinvention requires action, not just planning. That action piece shows up in your day-to-day life. Okay, so now let's talk about how to actually reinvent yourself. First of all, you want to make sure that you're coming to the reinvention process from a place of self-acceptance, self-love, and self-compassion, not from a place of like beating yourself up, telling yourself you're not good enough the way that you are. Because first of all, coming at ourselves that way does not feel good. Right? And we deserve to be treated with compassion, love, self-respect, especially by ourselves. But also coming at ourselves in that very negative way is actually not a good way to sustain long-lasting change in ourselves. That doesn't really motivate us long-term. It actually makes us feel horrible. And if we do approach reinvention from a place of negativity, it will make us less and less likely to actually do the reinvention process over time because we know that we're going to feel bad about ourselves if we start it, right? And then secondly, the next reason why we don't want to approach reinvention from a place of self-criticism is that in order to really make our best decisions about what we actually want, we need to get in touch with what we value, what we truly care about, which means we need to be able to put ourselves, our thoughts, how we feel, what we want in a place of prominence. And we need to be able to trust ourselves and love ourselves enough to give ourselves the space to think about what we really want, right? So actually coming at yourself from a place of feeling like you're not good enough will actually only hurt you in the long run. Now, this was something that was very challenging for me to do when I first learned about this concept. So if it's feeling like a little challenging for you as you're thinking about it, you are not alone. And for me, I know I came from a very like authoritarian parenting environment that where criticism was the norm. Criticism was how my parents invoked behavioral change in us as children. So I had to learn a new way as an adult, both as a parent, because that wasn't how I wanted to parent, but also for myself and how I spoke to myself. And so one of the best ways that I've learned to do that is to just have a little conversation with myself, say something nice to myself. When I hear myself saying something that isn't as kind, like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Well, that was stupid. I'll say something nice instead, like, actually, it's okay. I understand how that happened. Wow. You made the best decision that you could have in the moment. And at first it feels really silly, but over time, it actually starts to feel really comforting. And then those negative thoughts come like less and less often. So this is an important just core principle when it comes to reinventing your life. Next up, you're going to want to define what matters to you and why. Understanding that your vision of what a good life looks like, what you value, what you want to have in your life can change over time as you change, as your life changes, as the world changes around you. So you want to be regularly reconnecting with yourself, what matters to you, what you want next. So for example, once upon a time, I was a banking and finance attorney. And the things that I wanted to do as a banking and finance attorney and what my life looked like when I saw myself in a career as a banking and finance attorney for the rest of my life looks very, very different from what I want my life to look like now as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. And yes, there are some values that held true both when I was a lawyer and now as an entrepreneur, but my vision for my life has changed. I don't see myself being a banking and finance attorney anymore. I don't know that I would say that I would never be one again, but when I think about what my future is, I definitely look at it from the lens of entrepreneurship. What kind of business do I want to build? Who do I want to help? What kind of work do I want to do in the world? How many hours do I want to work? Those are questions. What kind of work do I want to do in the world? And how many hours do I want to work? Those are questions that I also asked myself when I was an attorney, but it hits differently now that I am a business owner versus when I was an employee working for someone else. So the different stages of my life, the different visions that I have for my life really will impact how I'm reinventing myself. And the same will be true for you, which is why it's so important to regularly reflect on what matters to you, what's most important to you, what you value, and why, because then you'll use that as the decision-making tool for what you want to reinvent, which areas of your life you want to reinvent, and what outcomes you want to see in those areas of your life. Which brings me to step 3, which is you'll want to choose which areas of your life specifically you want to work on. It is very difficult to change everything about our lives all at once. And I'm going to say that it's impossible to change absolutely everything about your life all at once because we all have limited energy, limited bandwidth, limited hours of the day, and life is multifaceted and very complicated. And so if we try to change absolutely everything all at once, we're going to find that we're going to run out of bandwidth and that change is not sustainable. And so remember, we talked about sustainability being at one of the core principles of reinvention. So you're going to want to pick specific areas of your life that you want to focus on. And I did a video where I shared how I was reinventing my life and which areas of my life I decided to focus on and why. So I'll link to that video down in the description box so you can see me going through the process in my own life. So select 1 to maybe 5 areas of your life that you want to be areas of focus for your reinvention. Now, as for what those areas can be, it can be anything, any aspect of your life. It can be your career. It can be how you show up as a mom. It could be your hobbies. There's so many areas of our lives, which is why it's so individual. It's up to you to understand what's going on in your life, understand what your values are, and understand what areas you most want to focus on. And the number of areas that you can focus on will also be impacted by the size of the change that you're trying to make in each area. So for example, when I was making the shift from being a full-time, like a lawyer working full-time, to becoming an entrepreneur, that career change, that reinventing myself as moving from lawyer to entrepreneur, that took a huge portion of my extra bandwidth. But during that time, I still worked on something that I value a lot, which is being a present mom and wife. So my personal relationships, I still made time for those things. And I also made time for my physical health. But the truth is, not as much time on my physical health as I was spending on my business or my family, and not as much time as I had devoted in other stages of my life to my physical health. Stages when my physical health was my number one priority. And so that was my number one focus. And it took up the biggest chunk of my energy and bandwidth and time. So again, the bigger the change that you're trying to make in any one particular area, the fewer other areas you're going to want to change, or the smaller you're going to want to keep the changes in any other areas that you might want to change. So you're going to want to decide what you want to change and why you want to change it. The why behind why you want to change it is incredibly important for two reasons. One, motivation, because change is challenging. It requires more energy than just doing the same thing that you've always done. And so you're going to need to continually remind yourself why it matters to you and why this is what you value and this is the person that you want to become. This is how we sustain the motivation for change over the long haul. The second reason why you want to know your why behind the change is because the why is your goalpost. It's the destination, why you want to do it. The how can vary. So let's say the area of your life, you want to start a business. You want to become an entrepreneur, and your why might be more time freedom and income freedom so that you can spend time with your family. Well, the path to getting there, entrepreneurship is the how. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping that why in mind on your path there so that you're not, for example, building a business that's going to take up all your time so that you don't have the time and the income freedom that you want to have. There can be multiple paths to get to that destination. So when you know the what and the why, that is what allows you to keep going and trying different things, because that is also what is required in the reinvention process. Because remember, reinvention is not just straightforward. It's not a straight path. It's not even a stair step. It's kind of like concentric circles. It's a spiral. That's the word. It is a spiral where you're going to take some steps forward and then you're going to come back, and then you'll go forward and then you'll come back. And so how do you make sure that you don't just get stuck on the back, but you actually continue that momentum? It is your why that will drive it. The next step in the reinvention process is to think through how you might want to change it. Now, to continue the example that I used, so let's just say that you know that what you want to change is your career, how you make money. And why you want to change it is so that you have more time freedom and income freedom, right? Now, I already provided one how, which was entrepreneurship, but these two things, the having time and income freedom, doing work that I love, those are all things that I've always valued, even back when I was a lawyer. So in the beginning, when I chose the path of lawyer, that was one possible solution to get me to my ideal outcome, which is having an income that supported my ideal lifestyle, doing work that I loved, and also being able to be a present and energetic mom and wife. So lawyering was one way, and keeping those values in mind, as I climbed the career ladder, I would always look for jobs that would allow me to have some amount of autonomy and flexibility in my schedule so that I wasn't working 60-hour work weeks and could never be present with my family or was always tired, even if I was making a lot of money. And so when we take the time to think about, what are all the different ways that I could reach the outcome that I want to have, then that opens up possibilities for us. And this is something that we dive deeper into inside of the next chapter workshop, this process of life possibility mapping, because we want to make sure that we don't feel like we don't have options. We want to be aware of our options so that we can choose which option feels right to us in the moment. And if something doesn't work, that we're able to then hone in on what have we tried, what didn't work, what else could we try? So we always have options to get us to our ideal outcome. Next, you want to make sure that you're allowing reinvention to be a process, meaning it's a process of deciding what you want, deciding what you're going to try next, trying it, then evaluating it to see, hey, is this working? Is this not working? Do I want to try something else? And then iterating, meaning building on the lessons that you've learned, building on the things that you've tried, and continuing to make forward progress with the ultimate goal of figuring out a method, a path that's going to work for you, that's sustainable for you. And then over time, you will experience the changes that you are seeking. It's so important to be flexible and adaptable during this process and to focus more on the process than the destination. Because like I always say, life is the thing that happens between our goals. So the process of creating the life that you want to live is you actually living your life. So the process is what we're after more so than the outcome. The process of showing up in our lives as the person that we want to be, taking control of our lives, taking deliberate action in our lives, and really thinking through what we really want versus sitting back and letting things happen or being discouraged and quitting entirely when things don't work perfectly the first time. If we continually remind ourselves that it's about the process, it's about how we're showing up, it's about being who we're becoming by being the person that we're showing up as every single day, that's going to keep you heading in your most valued direction, right? Versus the easiest direction in the moment. And lastly, you're going to want to give it time. These changes, we're talking about potentially making fundamental changes in your life, in what your life looks like, and how you show up in your life, in who you are as a person. And all of those things are available to you if you want them, if you decide that they are a right fit for you, but they are also something that's going to take time. So we don't want to rush the process. We don't want to think that we're doing something wrong if we haven't completely reinvented our lives and became unrecognizable in just 90 days. That's actually highly unrealistic and just frankly clickbaity. So don't set yourself up for failure. Don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. Allow your reinvention process to take time and just incorporate it into the way that you are living. So reinvention is just how we live. It's not a thing that we do one time. It's how we show up in our lives. And you want to make sure that you're noticing when things are different because they are going to be different. You are going to be changing once you make the decision that changes what you want. And so pay attention to those tiny moments where you show up a little differently than you would have, where you were say more outgoing, where you texted a friend when maybe in the past you might have said, I'll do it later, and you forget when you've decided that building those relationships is something that's important to you. Notice those things and make sure that you're celebrating it because that is you reinventing yourself. Reinventing yourself can change your life. I know that it has changed mine so many times over the course of the years, and I'll continue to use this process to change my life going forward. And I love the results that it has created in my life. I've become a happier person, more self-actualized. I feel more in control of my life, and I feel like anything and everything is possible. And I want you to have those same experiences as well. So again, remember, I have 2 resources that can help you implement everything that I've shared with you in today's episode. So head on over to onebighappylife.com/next to join me for the live workshop, Your Next Chapter. And of course, be sure to download the free planner at onebighappylife.com/redesign. And I will see you next time.